Welcome to string objects. When you declare and initialize a string variable, you're actually creating an object. The string class is unique because string objects can be created by simply declaring a string variable like you would any other variable. The reference variable knows the address of the string object, and the object is assigned a value of whatever characters make up the string literal. Creating objects. A variable can hold either a primitive value or a reference to an object. Like variables that hold primitive types, a variable that holds an object reference must be declared. A class is used to define an object. Remember that a class is like a blueprint for an object. And the class name can be thought of as the type of the object. The declaration of object references are structured like the declaration of primitive variables. Generally, when we create an object, we do so with the new operator. Like this example right here. Title would be the variable name, the assignment operator, and then new what type, string, and we give it a value, AP Computer Science. This calls the string constructor, which is a special method that sets up the object. Creating an object is called instantiation, a word that you'll want to become familiar with. An object is an instance of a particular class. Strings in Java are objects represented by the string class. Because strings are so common, we don't have to use the new operator in order to create a string object. This is a special syntax that works only for strings. Once an object has been instantiated, you can then use the dot operator to invoke its method, such as title.length will return the length of title. Once a string is created, its value cannot be lengthened or shortened, nor can any of its characters change. Thus, we say that a string object is immutable. You can, however, create a new string object that can have the new version of the original string's value. String methods. Methods are the actions of our objects, and the string class has several methods that are useful for manipulating strings, which we will learn about shortly. A lot of the methods return something, such as a value or even a new string. Make a string object and assign a value. As stated previously, string variables are actually objects. Here is an example of a new string instantiation. The type of object is string. The name of the object is my name. It is a new string that contains the string literal Mrs. Rush. You can also create what's known as a null string. A null string is a string that has no value and therefore no length. It does not hold an address of a string object. We would create a null string to reserve the identifier name. This is sort of like stating our intentions without actually creating the object. You cannot perform a method on a null string, but you can perform a method on an empty string, which we will look at shortly. Any attempt to execute a method on a null string will result in a runtime error called a null pointer exception. So remember, a null string is a string that has no value, no length, and no address. Creating an empty string. An empty string is different from a null string. An empty string creates the object. An empty string is a string that has a value of quotation mark, and its length is 0. You'll notice that there's nothing between the open and closed quotation marks, not even a space. It may seem like a null string and an empty string are the same thing, but they're not, and the difference is subtle. The empty string has a value, and the null string does not. Therefore, you can perform a method on an empty string, but you cannot perform a method on a null string. Any attempt to execute a method on a null string again will result in a null pointer exception. So once again, an empty string, a value exists, so it's not null. There are no characters in the string literal. It has a value of open quotation, close quotation, and it has a length of 0 characters. What you see on the screen is a visual representation of what a string looks like in memory. The numbers below the characters are called the indexes, plural of index, of the string. Each index represents the location of where each of the characters lives within the string. Java is a zero-index language, which means that the index position starts at 0 and not 1. And that's an important thing to remember. We'll use that multiple times. An example of how we read this is the character at index position 5 of the my name string is the character capital R. Also, spaces and punctuation count as characters. We can see that the period after Mrs. is at index position 3, and the space that separates Mrs. and Rush is at index position 4. In our next video, we'll start working with some of the methods associated with strings.